Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Before we start today's story, I think it would be interesting if you could tell me in the comments which city in the world you're watching this video from. Leave your comments so we can see how far this story has reached. Click the like button and subscribe. All of this because the crisp morning air nipped at Laura Kim's exposed skin as she stepped out of her car, the gravel crunching beneath her running shoes. Shenandoah National Park stretched before her, a sea of autumn colors painting the landscape in brilliant hues of red, orange, and gold. She inhaled deeply, savoring the scent of pine and damp earth. "Tyler, you ready?" Nora called, glancing over at her running partner. Tyler James emerged from the passenger side, his breath visible in the cool air. "Born ready. Let's crush this trail." As they began their warm-up stretches, the sun peeked over the horizon, casting long shadows across the nearly empty parking lot. The only sounds were their controlled breathing and the occasional chirp of early rising birds. "Remember," Nora said, her tone serious. "We're here to train, not break records. Bocce yourself." Tyler nodded, a competitive glint in his eye. "Right, but last one to the ridge buys breakfast." Laura rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a grin. "You're on." As they set off down the trail, neither was aware of the piercing eyes watching them from the dense underbrush. Deep in the forest, a black bear stirred, its massive form shifting restlessly. The creature's ears twitched, picking up the faint sound of footfalls on the nearby path. The bear had been in a state of semi-hibernation, its body clock disrupted by an unseasonably warm autumn. Hunger gnawed at its belly, a primal urge intensified by months of reduced feeding. As the sound of human activity grew closer, the bear's nostrils flared, catching an unfamiliar scent. Meanwhile, Laura and Tyler had settled into a steady rhythm, their feet pounding the earth in perfect synchronization. The trail wound through towering trees, their canopy creating a tunnel of golden light. "You're lagging, Tim," Tyler teased, glancing back at Laura. She quickened her pace, drawing level with him. "Just warming up, James. Don't get cocky." As they rounded a bend, the trail narrowed, forcing them to run single file. Nora took the lead, her ponytail swinging with each stride. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees pressing closer to the path. In the depths of the woods, the bear had begun to move. Its powerful muscles rippled beneath its thick fur as it lumbered towards the source of the disturbance. Hunger and territorial instinct drove it forward, overriding its usual caution around humans. Laura and Tyler pressed on, oblivious to the danger that approached. Their breath came in controlled pants, their bodies working in harmony with the challenging terrain. As they climbed a small rise, Laura suddenly raised her hand, signaling Tyler to stop. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her eyes scanning the surrounding forest. Tyler frowned, straining his ears. "Hear what?" A twig snapped in the distance, followed by the rustle of undergrowth. Nora's heart rate, already elevated from the run, kicked into overdrive. "That?" she hissed. They stood frozen, every sense on high alert. The forest had gone eerily quiet, as if holding its breath. Then, through a gap in the trees, Laura spotted movement. Her blood ran cold as a massive black form emerged from the shadows. "Tyler," she breathed, her voice barely audible. "Bear." Tyler's eyes widened as he followed her gaze. The bear stood on all fours, its head swinging from side to side as it sniffed the air. It was bigger than either of them had imagined, its shoulders easily reaching Laura's chest height. "Don't move," Tyler whispered, his body tensed like a coiled spring. "Remember what they taught us in the safety course. No sudden movements." Laura nodded imperceptibly, her mind racing through everything she knew about bear encounters. "Stay calm. Make yourself look big. Back away slowly." But as the bear's eyes locked onto them, all rational thought fled her mind, replaced by primal terror. The bear rose onto its hind legs, towering over them. Its lips pulled back in a snarl, revealing yellowed teeth capable of crushing bone. A now, rumbling growl emanated from its chest, vibrating through the air. "Nara," Tyler said, his voice strained. "When I say run, you run. Don't look back. Just run." Before Laura could protest, the bear dropped to all fours and charged. Its powerful legs ate up the distance between them with frightening speed. "Run," Tyler shouted, giving Laura a hard shove to jumpstart her frozen limbs. They exploded into motion, adrenaline surging through their veins. The sound of heavy paws and snapping branches followed close behind as they tore down the trail. Laura's lungs burned, her legs pumping faster than she'd ever run before. Fear lent her speed she didn't know she possessed. Behind them, the bear pursued with single-minded determination. Its hunger, combined with the perceived threat to its territory, drove it to chase with relentless fury. The ground shook with each of its strides, the sound of its labored breathing mixing with the runner's panicked gasps. As they raced along the narrow trail, Laura's foot caught on an exposed root. She stumbled, her momentum carrying her forward. Time seemed to slow as she fell, the ground rising up to meet her. Tyler's hand shot out, grasping at empty air as she tumbled beyond his reach. Laura hit the ground hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. She rolled, twigs and stones scraping her exposed skin. As she came to a stop, she looked up to see the bear bearing down on her, its massive jaws open in a terrifying roar. In that moment, as the early morning sun filtered through the autumn leaves and the bear's shadow fell over her, Laura Kim knew that their routine training run had turned into a desperate fight for survival. The awakening of the forest had brought with it a primal terror, and the true test of their endurance was only beginning. Laura and Tyler sprinted down the trail, hearts pounding. "There," Nora gasped. "It's gaining." Tyler glanced back. The massive black bear was closing in, jaws snapping. "Split up," he yelled. "I'll distract it." Laura veered left as Tyler grabbed a fallen branch. He waved it, shouting, "Hang! Over here." The bear hesitated, then charged Tyler. He stumbled backwards, branch raised. Laura circled around, searching for an escape route. Thick underbrush blocked her path. "Tyler, climb," she called, spotting a sturdy oak. He scrambled up the trunk as the bear reared up, claws raking bark. Tyler clung to a branch, legs dangling tantalizingly close to snapping jaws. Laura frantically looked for a weapon. She hefted a fist-sized rock. "Leave him alone," she yelled, hurling it. The rock struck the bear's flank. It whirled, eyes locking on Laura. She froze, terror coursing through her. With a roar, the bear charged. Laura's legs finally obeyed. She sprinted, crashing through undergrowth. Branches whipped her face as she ran blindly. The bear's huffing breath grew closer. Laura's foot caught a root. She sprawled forward, crying out as her ankle twisted. Rolling over, she saw the bear looming above her. Its rank breath washed over her as saliva dripped from yellowed fangs. Laura scrambled backwards, hands scrabbling for anything to defend herself. Her fingers closed around a sharp stone. As the bear lunged, she struck out. The jagged edge slashed its muzzle. It recoiled, shaking its head and growling. Blood matted its fur. Nora struggled to her feet, limping away. Each step sent bolts of pain through her ankle. "Nara," Tyler called from behind. "This way." She turned, seeing him waving from a rocky outcrop. Nora hobbled towards him, the bear's angry roars spurring her on. Tyler helped her scramble up the boulders. They huddled together, watching the bear circle below. "What now?" Nora whispered, trembling. Tyler pulled out his phone. "No signal. You're on our Ellen." The bear rose on its hind legs, massive paws swiping at them. His claws scraped stone inches from their feet. "We can't stay here," Laura said. "It'll find a way up eventually." Tyler nodded grimly. "On three, we make a break for it. Ready?" Laura gripped his hand tightly. "Ready. 1, 2, 3. They leapt down, Laura crying out as her injured ankle buckled. Tyler hauled her up and they ran, the bear's furious roars echoing behind them. Laura stumbled, her injured ankle throbbing. The bear's hot breath panted behind them. Tyler grabbed her arm, pulling her along. "Keep moving," he shouted. They burst into a small clearing. Laura's legs gave out and she collapsed. "I can't go on," she gasped. The bear emerged from the trees, snarling. Tyler frantically searched for a weapon. "Nora, get up," he urged. She tried to stand, but pain shot through her ankle. The bear advanced, lips curled back. Tyler spotted a fallen branch. He snatched it up, positioning himself between Laura and the bear. "Pain, over here," he yelled, waving the branch. The bear hesitated, then charged. Tyler swung, connecting with its snout. It recoiled, shaking its head. Laura dragged herself towards a large boulder. "Tyler, run!" He backed away, keeping the bear's attention. It lunged again, massive paws swiping. Tyler dodged, but lost his footing. The branch flew from his grasp. The bear was on him in an instant. His jaws clamped down on his arm. Tyler screamed in agony. Laura watched in horror as blood stained his sleeve. Desperately, she hurled rocks at the bear. "Leave him alone." One struck its eye. The bear released Tyler, roaring in pain and anger. It turned towards Laura, who froze in terror. The bear charged. Tyler struggled to his feet, cradling his mangled arm. "Laura, run!" She scrambled backwards, but the bear was faster. His claws raked across her back. Nora cried out, feeling warm blood soak her shirt. She rolled, narrowly avoiding snapping jaws. Tyler limped towards them, his face pale from blood loss. He grabbed a rock, hurling it with his good arm. It struck the bear's flank, diverting its attention. Tyler stumbled back as it charged him. Nora forced herself up, ignoring the searing pain. She spotted Tyler's fallen branch. As the bear reared up over Tyler, Laura swung the branch with all her might, connected with a sickening thud. The bear staggered, momentarily stunned. "Come on," Nora yelled, grabbing Tyler. They staggered away, supporting each other. Behind them, the bear shook off its daze and roared. "We can't outrun it," Tyler panted, his steps faltering. Laura spotted a steep ravine ahead. "Dare, we can lose it down there." They half ran, half slid down the slope. Loose rocks tumbled around them. The bear pursued, its massive form crashing through undergrowth. At the bottom, a fast-flowing stream blocked their path. "We have to cross," Laura said, eyeing the choppy water. Tyler nodded weakly, his face ashen. They waded in, gasping at the icy current. The bear reached the ravine's edge, hesitating at the steep descent. Laura and Tyler struggled across, the water reaching their chests. The current threatened to sweep them away. Finally, they reached the far bank, collapsing on the rocky shore. The bear paced above, roaring in frustration. It began picking its way down the slope. "It's still coming," Tyler groaned. Laura helped him up. "Just a little further. We can make it." They limped into the dense forest, leaving a trail of blood. The bear's angry bellows echoed behind them. As they pushed through the underbrush, Laura's vision began to blur. Blood loss and exhaustion took their toll. Tyler stumbled, nearly falling. "Nara, I can't." She tightened her grip on him. "Don't give up. Grano's safe." But as the words left her mouth, a low growl sounded ahead. They froze, watching in disbelief as a second bear emerged from the shadows. Laura and Tyler stood paralyzed as the second bear emerged. Their eyes darted between the new threat and the first bear still pursuing them. "We're trapped," Tyler whispered, his injured arm hanging limply. Laura scanned their surroundings, spotting a tall oak tree. "Dare, can you climb?" They stumbled towards the tree, adrenaline masking their pain. Nora boosted Tyler up, wincing as her injured back stretched. She scrambled up after him, just as the first bear reached the clearing. The two bears faced off, growling. The runners watched from above, hearts pounding. "My phone," Nora gasped, fumbling in her pocket. No signal. Tyler's face was pale from blood loss. "We can't stay here forever." The bears' standoff ended as the newcomer retreated into the forest. The first bear, seemingly reinvigorated, turned its attention back to the tree. It rose on its hind legs, claws scraping bark. The tree shuddered. "It's going to knock us down," Nora realized. She looked at Tyler's weakening grip. "We need to distract it." She broke off a branch, hurling it at the bear. It bounced off its head, enraging the creature further. The bear redoubled its efforts, the tree swaying dangerously. "I can't hold on," Tyler groaned, his grip slipping. Laura grabbed him, but his weight pulled them both down. They hit the ground hard, the wind knocked from their lungs. The bear loomed over them, jaws open wide. Nora closed her eyes, bracing for the attack. Suddenly, a loud whistle pierced the air. The bear hesitated, then lumbered off into the forest. Laura opened her eyes to see a park ranger approaching, bear spray raised. "Are you all right?" the ranger called. "We need help," Laura managed, before darkness overtook her. When she regained consciousness, Laura found herself on a stretcher, paramedics tending to her wounds. Tyler lay nearby, receiving treatment. "You're lucky," a ranger said. "We were alerted by some hikers who heard the commotion as they were lifted into a rescue helicopter." Laura grasped Tyler's hand. They'd survived, but the ordeal was far from over. Tyler clung to the tree, his injured arm throbbing. The bear circled below, growling menacingly. "Nara," he called out, scanning the forest. A faint voice replied, "Here, I'm trying to find help." The bear suddenly lunged, its claws raking the tree trunk. Tyler scrambled higher, branches whipping his face. "It's climbing," he shouted, panic rising. Laura emerged from the underbrush, clutching a large branch. "Hey, over here," she yelled, waving frantically. The bear hesitated, torn between its treed prey and the new threat. Laura advanced, swinging the branch. "Come on, you furry menace," she taunted, her voice trembling. The bear dropped to all fours, turning towards her. Nora's bravado faltered as it charged. Tyler watched in horror. "Laura, run!" She backpedaled, tripping over a root. The bear loomed over her, jaws snapping. In desperation, Nora grabbed her water bottle, spraying the bear's face. It recoiled, shaking its head in confusion. Tyler seized the moment, leaping to a nearby tree. His injured arm gave way and he plummeted. The bear, startled by the movement, retreated momentarily. Tyler hit the ground hard, crying out in pain. Laura scrambled to him. "Can you move?" He nodded weakly. They staggered away, the bear's angry roars spurring them on. As they crested a hill, they heard voices in the distance. "Help!" Laura screamed. "We're here!" The bear crashed through the underbrush behind them. They picked up speed, hope giving them strength. Suddenly, a park ranger appeared, brandishing bear spray. "Get behind me," he ordered. As the bear charged, the ranger unleashed a cloud of spray. The animal reared back, pawing at its eyes. More rangers arrived, forming a protective circle around Laura and Tyler. The bear, overwhelmed, finally retreated into the forest. Laura collapsed, the adrenaline fading. Tyler knelt beside her, both of them trembling with relief and exhaustion. As paramedics tended to their wounds, Laura grasped Tyler's hand. They'd survived, but the ordeal had only just begun. The forest echoed with Laura's desperate cries. "Help! Somebody, please!" Her voice, hoarse from screaming, barely carried through the dense foliage. She dragged herself along the forest floor, every movement sending shockwaves of pain through her battered body. In the distance, Park Ranger Mike Holden's ears perked up. He'd been patrolling the outer trails when he heard the faint sound. "Did you hear that?" he asked his partner, reaching for his radio. "Hear what?" His partner, Sarah, replied, straining to listen. Another cry pierced the air, clearer this time. "There!" Mike exclaimed. He keyed his radio. "Base, this is Ranger Holden. We've got a possible distress call in Sector 7. Requesting backup and medical assistance." The radio crackled to life. "Copy that, Ranger Holden. Backup and medical en route. Proceed with caution." Mike and Sarah moved swiftly through the undergrowth, following the sound of Laura's voice. As they drew closer, the cries became more distinct, tinged with pain and fear. "Cano," Mike called out. "This is the Park Rangers. Can you hear me?" Laura's heart leapt at the sound. "Yes, over here. Please hurry." The Rangers burst into a small clearing, their eyes widening at the sight before them. Laura lay on the ground, her clothes torn and bloodied. A few yards away, Tyler leaned against a tree, his face pale and arm hanging at an awkward angle. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed, rushing to Laura's side. "What happened?" "There?" Nora gasped, tears of relief streaming down her face. "It attacked us. Tyler. He's hurt bad." Mike approached Tyler, assessing his injuries. "Hang in there, buddy. Help's on the way." He turned to Sarah. "Radio for immediate medevac. These injuries are severe." As Sarah called it in, Mike began administering first aid. "Can you tell me what happened?" he asked, trying to keep them conscious and talking. Tyler winced as Mike wrapped his arm. "We were running. The bear came out of nowhere. We tried to get away, but..." His voice trailed off as a low, menacing growl rumbled from the tree-line. Mike's hand instinctively went to his bear spray. "Sarah," he said quietly, "get them ready to move. Now." The bear emerged from the shadows, its eyes fixed on Laura and Tyler. It was the same one from before, now even more agitated and aggressive. "Oh no," Laura whimpered. "It's back." Mike positioned himself between the injured runners and the advancing bear. "Hey!" he shouted, trying to appear as large as possible. "Get out of here." The bear rose to its hind legs, towering over Mike. It roared, the sound reverberating through the clearing. Sarah helped Nora to her feet, supporting her weight. "We need to go now." Tyler stumbled as he tried to stand, crying out in pain. The bear's attention snapped to him, and it dropped to all fours, preparing to charge. Mike unholstered his bear spray, aiming it at the creature. "Last warning," he yelled. The bear lunged forward. Mike squeezed the trigger, unleashing a cloud of pepper spray directly into the bear's face. It reared back, roaring in pain and confusion. "Knowles," Mike ordered, backing away slowly. They retreated as quickly as they could, Laura and Tyler leaning heavily on the Rangers. The bear's agonized roars faded behind them, but they didn't slow their pace. As they reached a wider trail, the whir of helicopter blades filled the air. "The medevac's here," Sarah said, relief evident in her voice. The helicopter touched down in a nearby clearing. Paramedics rushed out, quickly assessing Laura and Tyler's conditions. Multiple lacerations, possible internal bleeding. One paramedic reported, examining Laura. "We need to get her to the hospital immediately." Another paramedic looked at Tyler's arm. Compound fracture, severe blood loss. He was going into shock. As they were loaded onto the helicopter, Laura reached out for Tyler's hand. "Stay with me," she pleaded, her vision blurring. Tyler managed a weak squeeze. "Always," he whispered. The helicopter lifted off, carrying them to safety. On the ground, Mike and Sarah watched it disappear over the treetops. "That was too close," Sarah said, shaking her head. Mike nodded grimly. "And it's not over yet. That bear is still out there, and now it's wounded and angry. We need to alert all units and close down this section of the park." As they headed back to base, the forest seemed to close in around them. The bear's roars had faded, but the danger still lurked in the shadows. The rescue mission was complete, but the ordeal was far from over. Back at the ranger station, a flurry of activity erupted as news of the attack spread. Maps were unfurled, search parties organized, and warnings issued to all hikers in the area. The race was on to find and neutralize the threat before anyone else fell victim to the forest's awakened fury. The rhythmic thump of the helicopter blades sliced through the air as it touched down in a small clearing near the attack site. Park Ranger Mike Holden leapt out, followed closely by wildlife biologist Dr. Emma Reeves and a team of armed rangers. The tension in the air was palpable as they surveyed the dense forest surrounding them. "Remember," Mike shouted over the dying rotor noise, "this bear is injured and extremely aggressive. Stay alert and stick together." Dr. Reeves adjusted her tranquilizer rifle. "Our priority is to sedate and relocate. Lethal force is an absolute last resort." The team nodded grimly, spreading out in a defensive formation as they moved towards the last known location of the bear. The forest seemed unnaturally quiet, as if holding its breath in anticipation of the confrontation to come. Meanwhile, a few hundred yards away, Tyler James leaned heavily against a tree, his injured arm cradled against his chest. Beside him, Laura Kim lay unconscious, her breathing shallow and labored. The park ranger who had initially found them, Sarah, knelt beside Laura, checking her vital signs with growing concern. "How is she?" Tyler asked, his voice hoarse with pain and worry. Sarah's face was grim. "Not good. We need to get her out of here fast." She keyed her radio. "Base, this is Ranger Cooper. We need immediate medevac at my location. Victim is unconscious and condition is deteriorating." The radio crackled with static before a response came through. "Copy that, Ranger Cooper. Pt.5 en route. ETA 10 minutes. Tyler's relief was short-lived as a low, menacing growl emanated from the undergrowth. Sarah's head snapped up, her hand moving to her bear spray. "It's back," she whispered. The massive black bear emerged from the shadows, his eyes fixed on Laura's prone form. Blood matted its fur where Laura had struck it earlier, and its movements were erratic, driven by pain and hunger. Sarah slowly stood, positioning herself between the bear and her charges. "Hey!" she shouted, trying to appear as large and intimidating as possible. "Get out of here." The bear rose to its hind legs, towering over Sarah. It roared, the sound reverberating through the clearing and sending birds scattering from nearby trees. Tyler struggled to his feet, ignoring the searing pain in his arm. "We have to do something," he gasped. Sarah backed up slowly, never taking her eyes off the bear. "Stay behind me," she ordered. "When I say run, you grab Laura and go. Head for the ridge. The medevac will find you there." "But what about you?" Tyler protested. "I'll hold it off. Now get ready." The bear dropped to all fours, muscles bunching as it prepared to charge. Sarah's fingers tightened on the bear spray canister. Suddenly, a shout rang out from the trees. "Hey, over here!" Mike Holden burst into the clearing, waving his arms wildly. The bear's attention snapped to him, momentarily confused by the new threat. "Now!" Sarah yelled. Tyler scooped up Laura with his good arm, crying out in pain but forcing himself to move. He staggered towards the ridge, every step an agony of effort. The bear, seeing its prey escaping, lunged forward. Sarah unleashed a stream of bear spray directly into its face. The animal reared back, roaring in pain and anger. Mike used the distraction to circle around, trying to cut off the bear's pursuit of Tyler and Laura. "Dr. Reeves," he shouted into his radio. "We need that tranq now." Emma's voice crackled back. "On my way. Keep it distracted." The bear, partially blinded by the spray, charged wildly. Sarah dove out of the way, rolling to her feet as Mike pelted it with rocks. "Come on, you overgrown fur ball," Mike taunted, drawing its attention away from Tyler's retreating form. The bear's head swung between Mike and Sarah, torn between targets. It let out another earth-shaking roar, frustration evident in its voice. Suddenly, Emma appeared at the edge of the clearing, tranquilizer rifle raised. "Hold it still," she called. Mike and Sarah redoubled their efforts, shouting and waving to keep the bear's attention. The animal rose again on its hind legs, presenting a perfect target. Emma squeezed the trigger. The tranquilizer dart whistled through the air, striking the bear in the shoulder. It roared in surprise and pain, staggering slightly. "It's not going down," Sarah yelled, backing away as the bear dropped to all fours again. Emma frantically reloaded. "It'll take a few minutes to take effect. We need to keep it here." The bear, driven into a frenzy by the dart, the spray, and the noise, charged at Mike. He barely managed to dodge, feeling the rush of air as massive claws swept past his face. "Any time now, Doc," Mike shouted, scrambling away from another swipe. Emma fired again, a second dart joining the first. The bear's movements began to slow, its steps becoming unsteady. "It's working," Sarah exclaimed, but the bear had one last surge of energy. It turned and lumbered towards the ridge where Tyler had disappeared with Laura. "Lo!" Mike yelled, running after it. Just then, the sound of helicopter blades filled the air. The medevac appeared over the treetops, hovering above the ridge. The bear, startled by the noise and light, reared up one final time before collapsing heavily to the ground, finally succumbing to the tranquilizers. Mike, Sarah, and Emma approached cautiously, weapons at the ready. But the bear lay still, its chest rising and falling in deep, sedated breaths. "Is it over?" Sarah asked, her voice shaky with adrenaline. Mike nodded, his eyes fixed on the ridge where the medevac was touching down. "For now, but we need to get this bear relocated fast, and pray that Tyler and Laura made it to the chopper in time." As the team secured the unconscious bear, the medevac lifted off, carrying the injured runners to safety. The forest seemed to exhale, the immediate danger past. But the events of the day had forever changed the lives of all involved, leaving scars both physical and emotional that would take far longer to heal than any wounds inflicted by tooth or claw. The rhythmic beep of medical monitors filled the air as Laura Kim slowly regained consciousness. Her eyes fluttered open, immediately squinting against the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room. Confusion washed over her as she tried to piece together where she was and how she'd gotten there. "Nara, can you hear me?" A gentle voice broke through her disorientation. She turned her head slightly, wincing at the pain that shot through her body. A nurse stood beside her bed, a look of concern on her face. Where am I?" Laura managed to croak out, her throat dry and scratchy. "You're in Shenandoah Memorial Hospital," the nurse explained softly. "You've been here for 3 days. Do you remember what happened?" Flashes of memory assaulted Laura's mind. The bear, the chase, Tyler's screams. Her heart rate spiked, setting off an alarm on one of the machines. "Tyler!" she gasped, trying to sit up. Pain lanced through her back, forcing her back down with a cry. The nurse placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Easy now. Your friend is okay. He's in the room next door, recovering. Relief flooded through Laura, but it was short-lived as the full weight of their ordeal settled over her. Tears began to well up in her eyes. It's okay, the nurse soothed. You're safe now. I'll let the doctor know you're awake. As the nurse left, Laura took stock of her injuries. Her back throbbed where the bear's claws had raked across it. Her ankle was elevated and wrapped tightly. Various tubes and wires connected her to machines she couldn't name. A few minutes later, a doctor entered the room, followed by two people Laura recognized as park officials. Miss Kim, the doctor greeted her. I'm Dr. Patel. How are you feeling? Like I went 10 rounds with a freight train, Laura replied, attempting a weak smile. Dr. Patel nodded sympathetically. That's to be expected. You've been through quite an ordeal. You have multiple lacerations on your back that required stitches, a sprained ankle, and various cuts and bruises. You also lost a significant amount of blood, which is why you've been out for so long. Laura absorbed this information, then asked, And Tyler? Mr. James is doing well, all things considered, Dr. Patel assured her. He suffered a compound fracture in his left arm, which required surgery, and he also had some deep lacerations, but he's expected to make a full recovery. One of the park officials stepped forward. Miss Kim, I'm Ranger Mike Holden, and this is Dr. Emma Reeves, our wildlife biologist. We were hoping to ask you a few questions about the incident, if you're feeling up to it. Laura nodded slowly. I'll try. For the next hour, Laura recounted the events of that terrifying day. She described their morning run, the first sighting of the bear, and their desperate attempts to escape. Ranger Holden and Dr. Reeves listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification on certain points. You and Mr. James showed remarkable resilience, Ranger Holden said when she finished. Your actions likely saved both your lives. Dr. Reeves added, The information you've provided will be invaluable in helping us understand and prevent similar incidents in the future. As they were about to leave, Nora asked, What happened to the bear? Dr. Reeves and Ranger Holden exchanged a glance before the biologist answered. We were able to tranquilize and relocate the bear to a more remote area of the park. It was an older male, likely driven to aggression by hunger and territorial instincts. Laura nodded, a mix of emotions swirling inside her. Relief that the bear hadn't been killed, fear at the memory of its attacks, and a strange sense of respect for the powerful creature that had nearly ended her life. As the day progressed, Laura received a steady stream of visitors. Her parents arrived, tearful and relieved to see her awake. Friends from the running club stopped by, bringing flowers and well wishes. Late in the afternoon, a knock on her door revealed Tyler, seated in a wheelchair pushed by a nurse. His left arm was encased in a cast, and various bandages covered his visible skin. Hey, running buddy, he said with a weak smile. Looks like we both missed our morning jog today. Despite everything, Laura found herself chuckling. I think we've earned a few rest days. As the nurse helped Tyler settle into a chair next to Laura's bed, an uncomfortable silence fell between them. The shared trauma of their experience hung in the air, unspoken but palpable. Finally, Tyler spoke, his voice thick with emotion. Nara, I'm so sorry. If I hadn't pushed us to train in that remote area dash. Stop, Laura interrupted. This wasn't your fault. We both agreed to that trail. We both underestimated the risks. Tyler nodded, blinking back tears. I keep replaying it in my head. Every decision, every moment. Wondering what we could have done differently. Me too, Laura admitted. But we survived, Tyler. Against all odds, we made it out alive. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared experience settling over them. Then Tyler reached out with his good hand, grasping Laura's gently. We're going to get through this. he said, his voice stronger now. Together, Laura squeezed his hand in return, feeling a surge of determination. Together, she agreed, as the sun began to set outside her window, casting a warm glow over the room. Laura felt a glimmer of hope for the first time since waking up. The road to recovery would be long and challenging, both physically and emotionally, but she and Tyler had survived the unthinkable, and that shared strength would carry them forward. The bear attack had changed them forever, leaving scars both visible and hidden. But as Laura drifted off to sleep that night, her hands still intertwined with Tyler's, she knew that they would face whatever came next the same way they had faced the bear, with courage, resilience, and an unbreakable bond forged in the crucible of survival. 6 months had passed since that fateful day in Shenandoah National Park. The leaves that had witnessed Laura and Tyler's terrifying ordeal had long since fallen, replaced by the tender buds of spring. As Laura sat in the waiting room of Dr. Samantha Chen's office, she couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed. The door opened, and Dr. Chen's warm smile greeted her. "Nara, come on in." Laura rose, her movements still carrying a hint of stiffness from her healed injuries. She settled into the familiar leather chair across from Dr. Chen, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "How are you feeling this week?" Dr. Chen asked, her pen poised over a notepad. Laura took a deep breath. "Better, I think. The nightmares are less frequent now." Dr. Chen nodded encouragingly. "That's good progress. How about your anxiety levels when you're outdoors?" "Still there," Laura admitted, "but I'm using the techniques we discussed. Deep breathing, grounding exercises. They help." For the next hour, Laura and Dr. Chen worked through the lingering trauma of the bear attack. They discussed Nora's fears, her progress, and the challenges she still faced. As their session was winding down, Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. "Nara, I think you've made remarkable progress these past few months. How do you feel about the idea of revisiting the park?" Laura's breath caught in her throat. The mere thought of returning to Shenandoah sent a shiver down her spine. But beneath the fear, she felt a flicker of something else. Determination, perhaps, or the need for closure. I don't know," she said honestly. "Part of me wants to, but another part is terrified." Dr. Chen nodded understandingly. "That's a completely normal reaction. Remember, there's no rush. This is something to consider only when you feel ready. But facing our fears in a controlled, safe manner can be a powerful tool for healing." Laura left the session with Dr. Chen's words echoing in her mind. As she walked to her car, she pulled out her phone and dialed a familiar number. "Hey Tyler," she said when he answered. "Are you free for coffee? There's something I want to talk about." An hour later, Laura and Tyler sat across from each other in a cozy cafe. Tyler's left arm, free from its cast but still bearing scars, wrapped around his coffee mug. "So, what's on your mind?" Tyler asked after they'd exchanged pleasantries. Nora took a sip of her latte, gathering her thoughts. "Dr. Chen suggested something in our session today. She thinks it might be helpful for me to revisit the park." Tyler's eyebrows shot up. "Shenandoah? Are you sure you're ready for that?" "That's just it," Laura sighed. "I'm not sure, but I can't shake the feeling that I need to do this. To face it, you know?" Tyler nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Yeah, I get that. To be honest, I've been thinking about it too. It's like there's this unfinished business." "Exactly," Nora agreed, relieved that he understood. "But I don't think I can do it alone. Would you consider coming with me?" Tyler reached across the table, taking Laura's hand in his. The gesture had become natural for them, a source of comfort born from shared trauma and recovery. "Of course," he said without hesitation. "We went through it together. We'll face it together." 2 weeks later, Laura and Tyler stood at the entrance to Shenandoah National Park. The morning sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the ground. Nora's heart raced, her palms sweaty as she stared at the trailhead. Tyler placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We don't have to do this if you're not ready. We can turn back." Nora shook her head. "No, I need to do this. We need to do this." They set off down the trail, moving slowly and deliberately. Every rustle in the underbrush made Laura flinch, her eyes darting around nervously. Tyler remained close, his presence a constant comfort. As they walked, they began to talk. At first, it was just observations about the trail or the weather, but gradually, their conversation deepened. "I still have dreams about it," Tyler admitted as they paused for water. "Not just nightmares, but dreams where I'm back here, reliving every moment." Laura nodded. "Me too. Sometimes in the dreams I can't move. I just watch as the bear." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Tyler understood. "In mine, I can never reach you in time. I keep running and running, but you're always just out of reach." They continued on, their pace slowing as they approached the area where the attack had occurred. Laura's breath came in short gasps, her heart pounding in her chest. "Wait," she said suddenly, grabbing Tyler's arm. "I need a minute." They stopped, and Laura closed her eyes, focusing on her breathing just as Dr. Chun had taught her. In out, in out. Slowly, the panic began to recede. When she opened her eyes, she found Tyler watching her with concern. "You okay?" Laura nodded. Yeah, I think so. Let's keep going." As they entered the clearing where their lives had changed forever, an eerie silence fell over them. Laura's eyes were drawn to a particular tree, its bark still bearing faint scars from the bear's claws. "This is where it happened," she whispered. Tyler nodded, his face pale. "I can still hear it. The roar, the sound of it charging." They stood there for a long moment, lost in their memories. Then, slowly, Laura walked to the center of the clearing. She knelt down, her fingers brushing the forest floor. "We survived," she said, her voice growing stronger. "Right here in this spot we faced death and we survived." Tyler joined her, kneeling beside her. "We did. Against all odds, we made it." As they knelt there, something shifted in the air around them. The forest no longer felt menacing, but alive with the sounds of birds and rustling leaves. The sunlight seemed brighter, warming their skin. Laura turned to Tyler, tears glistening in her eyes, but a smile on her face. "Thank you for being here, for everything." Tyler pulled her into a tight embrace. "Always," he murmured into her hair. They stayed in the clearing for a while longer, talking, remembering, and slowly beginning to heal. When they finally stood to leave, Nora felt lighter, as if a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying had lifted from her shoulders. As they made their way back to the trailhead, they encountered a park ranger. The ranger's eyes widened in recognition. "Miss Kim? Mr. James?" he asked incredulously. "I can't believe it. You the runners from the bear attack last fall, aren't you?" Laura nodded, surprised to be recognized. "Yes, that's us." The ranger shook his head in amazement. "Your story, it's become something of a legend among the staff here. The way you both survived, it's incredible." Tyler smiled wryly. "It certainly doesn't feel like a legend when you're living it." The ranger nodded solemnly. "I can only imagine. Listen, would you be willing to come to the ranger station? There's someone there who'd really like to meet you." Curious, Laura and Tyler agreed. They followed the ranger to the station, where they were introduced to a young woman in a park uniform. "This is Sarah Cooper," the ranger explained. "She was part of the team that rescued you that day." Sarah stepped forward, her eyes shining with emotion. "I've thought about you two every day since the attack," she said. "To see you here, looking so well, it's more than I could have hoped for." Laura felt a lump form in her throat. "We owe you our lives," she said softly. Sarah shook her head. You two are the real heroes. Your strength, your will to survive. It's inspired all of us here. For the next hour, Laura and Tyler sat with Sarah and several other rangers, sharing their story in full for the first time. They spoke of their terror, their determination, and their long road to recovery. As they talked, Laura realized that their experience wasn't just about survival anymore. It had become a story of resilience, of the human spirit's capacity to overcome unimaginable odds. Before they left, the head ranger approached them with a request. We've been working on updating our wildlife safety programs, he explained. Your experience, well, it could be invaluable in helping us educate visitors and prevent future incidents. Would you be willing to share your story as part of our program? Laura and Tyler exchanged a glance. The idea of reliving their ordeal publicly was daunting, but the potential to help others, to possibly prevent someone else from going through what they had. We'd be honored, Tyler said, and Laura nodded in agreement. As they drove home that evening, a comfortable silence filled the car. The visit to the park had been challenging, emotional, but ultimately healing in a way neither of them had anticipated. You know, Laura said as they neared the city, I think I'm ready to start running again. Tyler glanced at her, surprise and hope mingling in his expression. Yeah, Laura nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. Yeah, not in the deep woods, not yet, but maybe in the city park to start. Tyler grinned, the first full, genuine smile she'd seen from him in months. I'd like that. We'll take it slow, build up our strength again. Together, Nora said, reaching for his hand. Tyler squeezed her fingers gently. Together, he agreed. As they pulled up to Laura's apartment, neither made a move to get out of the car immediately. The weight of the day, of everything they'd been through, settled over them. We made it, Laura said softly, turning to face Tyler. Not just that day in the forest, but through all of this. The recovery, the nightmares, the fear. We made it. Tyler nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. We did, and we're stronger for it. In that moment, sitting in the car with the person who had been through hell and back with her, Laura felt a surge of emotion she couldn't quite name. Gratitude, perhaps, or something deeper. Without thinking, she leaned across the center console and pressed her lips to Tyler's. He froze for a moment in surprise, then responded, his hand coming up to cup her cheek gently. When they pulled apart, both were slightly breathless. Tyler rested his forehead against hers, a soft chuckle escaping him. Well, he said, that's certainly one way to move forward. Nora laughed, the sound light and free in a way it hadn't been in months. I'd say it's a pretty good way. As she climbed out of the car, Nora paused, turning back to Tyler. Run with me tomorrow? Tyler's smile was answer enough. Wouldn't miss it for the world. That night, as Laura lay in bed, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The terror of the attack, the long, painful recovery, the emotional scars that were slowly beginning to heal, but also the strength she discovered in herself, the unbreakable bond she'd formed with Tyler, and the new purpose they'd found in sharing their story. The bear attack had changed her life irrevocably, but as Laura drifted off to sleep, she realized that not all change was bad. Sometimes, out of the darkest moments came the greatest light, and she was ready, at last, to step fully into that light, leaving the shadows of the past behind. In the morning, she would run again, and this time she wouldn't be running from anything. She'd be running towards something, towards healing, towards strength, towards a future that, for the first time in a long time, looked bright with promise. The forest had tested them, nearly broken them, but in the end, Laura and Tyler had emerged not as victims, but as survivors. Their story, born in terror and pain, had transformed into one of hope and resilience. And that, Laura realized as sleep finally claimed her, was the greatest victory of all.